This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're being recorded. And Peggy, did you hear the thing about putting embroidery thread in the top and the bobbin? Not embroidery bobbin thread, okay?
I did. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So there are not a lot of instructions with this exercise. So will be adding a few comments of my own as we go along. So let's get started here. For right now, what we're going to do is work in sewing. And the first thing, all of the stitches we're going to work with are in category 8, our techniques section. And the first one we're going to work with are the floating stitches, which are category 8-5. There are 23 of them, and each one makes a little bit different shape. For an example, this pillow, and it's hard to see. Let me get my camera turned around here. These, I don't know, you can see these little hourglass shaped ones. Those are floating stitches. And these little diamond ones are floating stitches. And there's two ways to make floating stitches. I mean, there's two ways to use floating stitches. You can use them like they were on that pillow, or as you can see here, they are just on a flat piece of fabric, or you can use them on a seam where the stitch is half on one color and half on the other color. To do these floating stitches, they're all basically a shaped satin stitch, and it's kind of fun. If you haven't done them, it's rather fun to see how to do them. So let's do the one where we're on a flat piece of fabric first. It'd be something like this one, where there are just the round ones on one piece of fabric. To do that, on your machine, you want to use your bi-level foot, which looks like this. It's with your machine. It has a blade in the middle of it, which let's see if I can move this over here. It has the blade in the middle of it, and it has the wide opening, and the two, it's difficult to see even in person, but this side of the foot is not as deep, or it's a little higher than the other side of the foot. It's two different, that's why they call it bi-level, because there's two different levels to the bottom of the foot. So that's the foot we want to use when we're doing these floating stitches on one piece of fabric. And to do that, you're going to you need stabilizer, tearaway stabilizer, and one piece of fabric, which you're going to fold in half, right sides together. Okay? You're going to fold that in half, right sides together. And then you're going to put the stabilizer so it sticks out to the right side of the foot or the fabric, and that blade that is on your foot, it is going to be guiding your fabric. You're going to put the right side of your fabric, the folded edge of your fabric, up against that the left side of that blade. All right, and I'm going to pick a stitch. I picked number 3, which is squares, and I'm going to work with my needle down, and the object is, it's going to, if you look on the screen and look at the stitch, you see that you have squares, some stitches, squares, and stitches. And those stitches in between the squares, you want to make sure that they are not in your fabric. All right? They would need to be just on the stabilizer. And if you keep the folded edge of your fabric against that blade, you should be okay. So let me stitch this out. Come on, little one. And okay, it's stitching half on the fabric and half on the stabilizer for the squares. And then it comes down with those straight stitches just on the stabilizer. Okay. And this is what it looks like. Can you see that? You've got the fabric and the stitches halfway on the stabilizer and halfway on the fabric. And the straight stitches are going right down the middle, just like it looked on your screen. So then your next thing is to take and remove your stabilizer. And then you're going to open your fabric up. And when you open it, it just, you kind of see the stitches going between two pieces. And if you pull it out flat, give it a good tug, then that fabric slides to the edges of those stitches, and then your stitches look like they're floating. All right.
The speed of your machine?
I'm sorry, Mary?
Do you lower the speed of your machine?
Yeah, I'm running about 50%, and I'm using the foot pedal.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, thank you. And if you look at your settings for your stitches, you can make them wider or narrower. You can make them longer or shorter. And if we go down to stitch edit, you can change the density of them. Now you can't do it on all of these floating stitches, but on the majority of them, you can. Some of them are coming in at different widths and different lengths. So you do have the option to change those a little bit if you want to. Morning, Elizabeth. Glad you're here. And Marlene, thank you for being here. Okay, so pick a stitch, try it out, fold your fabric right sides together, lay it on your stabilizer, put the folded edge of your fabric against the left side of your blade. Your stabilizer needs to be sticking out on the right side of your fabric because half of your stitch is going to end up on your stabilizer. So you want your fabric to be sitting a ways from the edge of your stabilizer. So you have room to put the other half of your stitches on the stabilizer. Any
Well,
questions?
Judy, if I butt up against the blade, my straight stitch stitches on the fabric. So I have to go off just a smidgen.
Don't push it against the blade. Let it just gently ride against it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I found a thing that works for me, but
Okay. And it may be that the setting on your machine is just a little bit different. What stitch did you pick, Mary?
the round one, I think it was 17. Why am I not seeing the number?
17 is a star.
Well, then it's not 17.
If it's perfect, supposedly perfectly round, number 5 is round.
What?
Yeah, it must be 5. I picked it from something else that had a different label, but number 5 is what I picked.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Number 5 is only 7 wide. So I often wonder about whether I'm going to catch that fabric with that straight stitch, but most of the time I have not done that. But next time you bring your machine in for service, you might mention that to check that the needle is actually in the center.
Okay. If you look under, the instructions for floating stitches folded, that it was number 14 there, so that's kind of interesting to me.
That's Mary, that's the one I have too. When she said that, my number 14 is round, 5 is the fish.
Right, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
are
so
you okay? Are you loading from the help menu?
That's where I did it from, yeah.
me too.
Okay, because I did not. I just went straight to
I just followed directions on the sheet.
oh, that's dangerous.
So how do you get to the floating stitches if you don't follow the sheet?
You just pick your sewing stitches. Okay. Up here. Okay, on your machine. When you go to load a stitch and you go to category 8 and go to 8.5.
Okay. Yeah.
8.5 is your floating stitches.
The stitches are completely different on this window now than they were when you went from the following the sheet. Number wise, they're different.
Okay.
So the fish is number 16 now. Number 5 is the circle. How is that possible?
I don't know.
Now, if you,
Because look, if you go back, look at my screen. You get folding stitches folded. or floating stitches folded, floating stitches joined. So they, all right, stop that, you naughty thing. If I do floating stitches folded and I do content,
Right, see, and there they are, they're different.
yeah, they shuffled them.
Yeah, so how, I guess what I mean, it's not for me to decide this because I'm not the engineer, but wouldn't you think that those stitch numbers would be the same number as doing it like you originally did it?
Yeah, because there's 23 of them, and that's how many floating stitches on 8.5 there are.
Right, so something in the brain of this machine is unshuffling them.
I'm sorry.
I mean, but it's when Mary said that, I had the same thing Mary had, but you were saying something different. So it
Okay,
depends on how you enter into the machine.
Well, you
right.
know, the other thing is if you load it from the contents, it doesn't show you up under your information. It doesn't show you the stitch number like it will if you load it from your sewing things.
Oh
Your
yeah,
your
like
stitch.
like the 8.5.
Right.
Yeah, because I didn't have that going the way you and I went in first. It didn't have that.
And probably because it knew the numbers were different. There you go.
Okay, I'll buy it, but it just, yeah, it would mess up somebody just like it did. But if you're on your own, you're not going to know the difference.
Right. And I don't know why they would do that. I do know that when you go into the content on different menus, that you don't always get as many stitches. You know, they selectively pick stitches, but in this case, you got everything either way.
And it works, the stitches still work the same way. They just are numbered different in these two different windows.
Yes, they are. And I apologize for not going the way the directions said, because I knew what I wanted, so I just went after it.
Well, you shouldn't apologize. I was just slower getting started, so I had to read.
Okay. So, all right. Now, those same stitches, did everybody get some stitches stitched out and opened out so they lay flat? Diane, I see yours. You like that? That's pretty cool. And sometimes you have to really tug at them to get them to lay flat when you have used this method where they're folded.
Counterintuitive to have the wrong sides together or the right sides together.
Yes. Well, it's like doing a seam, right sides together.
I
And
pressed mine, but there's still a little fold down the middle.
yeah, now I did play with that a little bit, and let me see if I can, the ones that are wider can give you more of a struggle to get them to lay flat without that little fold down the middle. So I went through stitch by stitch and I made myself a little chart of how wide and how long each of those stitches are. So I would know, you know, if I were wanting to make a project and looking to see what kind of, you know, how wide the stitches were, and maybe before I actually started, if I might need to make some adjustment. And you can turn your tension down on the upper part. on your screen, you have your tension setting. And on these stitches, some of them use the active stitch technology. So you see this symbol with the 3 circles and the arrow. Some of them are using, make a liar out of me. They're all using that, but this is over here on the right-hand side at the bottom. You can turn your tension down so that the top thread is a little bit looser and doesn't pull as hard when you try to open it up. And this one that I did here, I set the tension at 40, and one that I did not set the tension at 40, and you probably can't see the difference. I do have a little bit of it wants to put a little fold in here. So sometimes loosening up that top tension can help you not get that fold in there.
Judy,
Make sense? Yes.
Judy,
Yes,
what if you were using a really heavy fabric?
How heavy, like?
Oh, maybe like a duck cloth or something?
Like a duck cloth or a denim or something?
Yeah.
I definitely would probably increase the density, but I would practice and play with the tension, loosening the top tension.
Okay.
Okay, and the thing about it is if you're using this bi-level foot, it's very flat on the bottom, so there's no groove in it underneath it. So you have to be careful as to what kind of thread you use that's not too thick, that's going to build up. And if it does build up, then your foot's going to have a problem in moving. And I can show you examples of that because I tried using regular sewing thread and it did not work out very well at all because this foot does not have a groove in it to accommodate any buildup of thread. Okay. Does that make sense, Sue? Shake your head, yes? Okay. So when you're using the folded fabric technique and this bi-level foot, you want to be careful as to how heavy a thread you're using. All right, any questions?
You know, the other thing that I've noticed is I can't use my little tie-off thing to, to finish a pattern.
You can't.
If I push I was pushing the wrong one. Never mind. I'm dumb. I guess I need more coffee.
Okay.
Don't feel bad, Mary. I'm right there with you.
Just as an example of, I said you could change the density of a stitch, and I don't know how well you can see this, but I did the little arrow. The one on the left is normal density, and then I upped it. I made it more dense, and it looks to me a whole lot better. It's, it's more filled in. So I definitely recommend that if you're going to do some of these, that you practice and play first, so you aren't disappointed with the end results. Any other questions on that so far?
Yes, Judy. If we can't move our needle over, it doesn't look like either, right? If we wanted it just over a little bit so it didn't hit the edge.
Um,
I'm trying
no,
to do.
it's not gonna let you move the needle.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure that was true.
That's true. It's grayed out.
Okay.
This pfaff machine has definite ideas about it, what it is going to let you do and what it is not going to let you do. I've found that out in playing with a few things here recently.
My other question is that we have our IDF on, which I am confused because I kind of thought that was more for straight stitching than for side to side stuff.
Which one?
The IDF foot, I mean, the having a down, the IDT.
The IDT?
It's supposed to be down, right?
Well, it's just it's a decorative, I mean, they're all satin stitches
Okay.
and straight stitches. So it's just moving forward, so that using the IDT is fine.
So when don't we use the IDT then? Of course, in embroidery we don't, but.
You don't use it if you are doing, if the feed dogs are moving side to side. Now, some of your decorative stitches that are wider
Okay.
and so forth. So, basically these are a straight forward or, normal sewing motion where your fabric is feeding straight back. So using the IDT is fine.
But we do have to have our wide plate on, obviously, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I still don't quite
Because
understand.
of the satin portion.
Right, exactly. Huh, interesting. Okay.
Okay. So then the next way, the other way, shall I say, to use these stitches is to do a seam. All right. And that's where you have two different pieces of fabric. And incidentally, you can undo these and redo them, which is kind of interesting. So this is my two pieces of fabric, and I just sewed straight down with a seam allowance. Okay.
Your
Can you see
camera's
that?
off.
That there's a seam allowance there. All
It's
right.
off a little bit, Judy.
Huh?
Hard to see your sample a little bit.
I'm sorry.
You're off, too far off to the left. Okay.
There it is, Peggy.
Okay.
All right. So again, I'm going to pick a stitch, and this time I'm going to pick the whatever. Let's see. I'm going to pick the hourglass one, which on where I am on 8.5 is number 10. Okay. If I go back to the tutorial, it is number 13. Also, when you are doing a floating stitch as a seam, you are not going to use your bi-level foot. You are going to use your 2A or your 1A foot, or at least that's the one. It may, and I don't know, the directions may tell you to use the 2A, do they? Yes. It says disengage the IDT and use the 2A. The machine says use the IDT, and I like to use the 1A foot because it has the groove in the bottom of it to accommodate any little bit of stitch buildup, whereas the 2A foot, oh, okay. The 2A foot also has a groove in it, which you can't see.
My instructions say use the 1A.
I'm sorry?
My instructions for joining the floating stitch, it says use the 1A.
Okay, I'm on the wrong page. Thank you, Mary. Where am I? Over the category, 2 layers.
On the screen, it just says a plus foot.
That's because with those stitches, you have the option of using either that bi-level foot when you're using the folded technique, or you're going to use a flat foot without, without a difference in the levels when you're using them as a seam. So that means that you have an option to decide which foot you're going to use depending on which technique you're using the stitch for. Does that make sense?
Yep, except I think I asked Therese one day, what is the plus foot? She was like, I don't know that there really is a plus foot. So now I know what that means.
No, it's one of those you pay your money and take your choice as to which one you want to use. Okay?
Good to know.
Okay, so I'm going to use the 1A foot. You can use the 1A or the 2A depending on whether or not you want to use the IDT. All right? So this just stitches out like your stabilizer is underneath your fabric. It doesn't need to extend out over the edge. Stop moving, camera. Okay. Okay, so now you have stitches and they're completely on the fabric with a seam allowance of however much you want to the right side. And again, you want to remove your stabilizer. Because if you try to open these up with all that excess stabilizer in there, they won't open up as well. And then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to take the two pieces of fabric and pull them apart. And in between your satin portion of the stitch, that straight stitch seams the fabric as well as your satin stitch seaming the fabric in between the straight stitches. Okay?
How can we tell our stitch width? I mean, our seam width, yeah, with this.
Well, I have mine sitting on my screen because I've moved them when I open Stitch Edit, and it lets you move those things up to your screen. I just keep mine on my screen. And instead of having to bring up Stitch Edit all the time and cover up a part of my screen. Do you know how to do that, Lee? Does that make sense?
I do know how to do that, but I still don't quite know how to say that I have a 1/4 inch seam.
Oh, you're talking about your seam allowance, not
Right,
your
the seam allowance, right.
Well,
I
you
don't know
got a 1/4. If you put your stabilizer even with the edge of your fabric, okay, you can still use the marks that are on your throat plate or on your needle plate. Because on your throat plate, you have these marks, and there's a 1/4 inch mark that I use a lot, and I guide my edge of my fabric right along that edge, that 1/4 inch mark.
Okay. That's helpful because I tend to just move my needle over or use the 1/4 inch, so,
Yeah, you can't, you certainly can't use the 1/4 inch foot.
yeah, I used to use the 1/4 inch stitch is what I tend to do most of the time.
Okay, well, again, you can't, with this, you can't do that. So just line your fabric up or your stabilizer up with the edge of your fabric and then use your 1/4 inch marks on your machine, either on the, well, you don't have a 1/4 inch mark on the needle plate because that's still part of the feed dog. So use
Right,
the
but I can see it
1/4 inch
now.
mark on your bobbin cover.
Right, that's a great idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's helpful.
How do you change your screen so that you see your stitch edit on the left like that?
Okay, let me show you. First off, let me get rid of these. Okay. Go away. You're being, all right. So it's naked now, right? I don't have any of those on my screen at the moment. So I'm going to touch stitch edit. Up here in the very left-hand corner, see that little blue box with the arrow in it? Right
Yeah.
by the word stitch edit.
Yep. Oh.
When I touch that, see those little blue boxes with arrows? So if I want my stitch length to come up to my screen, I just pick it up and I drag it. I want my stitch width up on my screen. I want my, okay, I want my density. Now, if I want my needle position, I have to touch that box again to get the part down here to go back to normal. And then I need to touch that so I'm seeing my needle position. Again, I can touch that, and now I bring my needle position up also. And I can, I could put my tension up there if I wanted. All that's, whatever. And then I have them readily available and don't have to go into stitch edit to adjust them or just to see what they are.
That is awesome. Thank you.
You are most welcome. Any
So
other questions at the moment? Okay, so some of these stitches are very different. And again, on 8/5, they are at the very, okay, I told you that some of them you could change the density on. The ones that on 8/5 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, from 19 through 23, you cannot change the density. Where they are in the content, they're 8 through 11 or 8 through 12 if you're going on the content screen. But those ones stitch out like, see the one here that is between the yellow and the orange? That's one of those stitches that you can't change the density on. You can change the stitch length and the stitch width, but you can't change any density on stitches that are those, what I call straight line stitches. Let's see if I have more of them on here. I do not. And some of them, some of them are 9 millimeters wide, and they are definitely, you don't want to use them on something where they could possibly be snagged because they are a 9 millimeter satin stitch and could be pulled fairly easily if they got caught on something. Okay. All right. So that's our floating stitches, which are a lot of fun and can be very decorative. And I really like them to use them on seams because they really show up. The next category, which if I'm gonna follow directions, we are on page 4, and we're talking about radiant stitches. So those on the number 8 techniques menu, those are 8.6. And on, let's see, floating stitches folded. No, I don't want that one. I want floating stitches. I don't want floating stitches joined. I want radiant stitches. And on the content on that one, they've shuffled them all over again. Don't ask me why. All right. And this time they are calling for the 2A foot. Again, I'm going to just, and no IDT on these because these can move the fabric around. Let's see. Let me get my act together here. I want to change my thread. Ouch. So you can, I've got light colored fabric and I want dark colored thread. So again, I'm using embroidery bobbin thread and embroidery thread in the needle. Okay, come on. All right. Radiant stitches are the ones that are used on when I made this sample. The radiant stitches are the ones that are in it turned out that every other seam has radiant stitches on it, and they can be sewn in a straight line or they can be sewn in curves. They can all be on one side or you can alternate them. You can come back with a second pass, put a whole row of them on one side and then come back with a second pass and put them on the other side. You can alternate them in a particular pattern, like one on the left, one on the right, or you can just mix it up. You can do more than one stitch by coming back with a second pass. You can vary them. You can do one on one side, two on the other, or you can just mix them up. When the pfaff, the icon first came out, the project that was done at convention is this scarf that Carol made, and she used floating stitches on the seam to put the two colors of the fabric together, and then she used a radiant stitch down one side to embellish the scarf. And then I played with them and I mixed up, and this is hard to see because it's white. I mixed up the radiant stitches in different colors. I put a floating stitch down the middle, and then I couldn't stand just doing it on the straight, so I did some, I did a curve with radiant stitches in it, and then just regular decorative stitches following the same curve. So your lines of radiant stitches do not have to be straight. And
That
in
is
fact, I think
beautiful.
it's pretty cool if they're not straight.
That was beautiful, Judy.
Now, did you use wash away stabilizer when you did that?
I
Trying to figure out how you get it
I
off the
don't
back.
remember, Lee. It's been,
Yeah, but I think you'd have to, wouldn't you? Just so you
no,
can get it off.
because when I did all of these, I did tear away.
Yeah, but that's not a scarf that you're going to see the back of it. That's
Well,
okay.
but still, when I clean up tear away,
Yeah.
I usually, this is the back of my tear away.
Pretty good. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
And especially if you use the ones that have the water soluble fibers in them, you know, they come away a lot easier.
Okay.
All right.
Next.
This pillow, you can see the radiant stitches were done in a circle, which is kind of cool.
Very cool. How did you do the edge of that scarf, Judy? I saw that tiny little stitch on the edge.
You can, I did mine, well, I did both of them. I did it on the serger as a rolled hem. You were supposed to be able to do it as on the sewing machine, and I never could get it to work right. I don't know what I was doing wrong, but I gave up and did it on the serger.
The reason I ask is I got volunteered to hem a bridesmaid dress
Yeah.
for my niece by my daughter, and it was a nightmare. I could not find a stitch that worked right. It was kind of a disaster.
A lot of it depends on the fabric.
Yeah, it was awful.
Most of those things are.
My daughter knows now, don't ever volunteer my skills again.
All right.
Judy, on that one with the circle, did you draw a circle and just follow the circle then? On the, I think it was a pillow.
I think so. It's been a while.
Okay.
This was a project we did with Alex. And I think, yeah, we drew the circle.
Could you use your circle attachment?
No. Because, oh, sorry, little fella. Because you're turning the fabric. You could do it the way that let me stitch out part of a radiant stitch, and I think you'll see why, which you may know already, Mary, but.
I'm with you, yeah.
Okay, so I drew a line. You don't have to have a line, but I did. I drew a line, and I'm going to just pick what for me is number 1, which is this little arrow radiant stitch. And what I'm going to use the foot pedal, but the machine is going to stop. And I could very well, let me use the start stop button just to make life easier, okay? I'm going to run with the needle down. I have the 2A foot in, which is exactly what the machine calls for. I have a stabilizer under my fabric, and I'm going to use my start stop button. It's going to stitch about 3 stitches. Now, when it stops, it's your job to turn the fabric 90 degrees. And what direction you turn the fabric determines which side of the line your stitch is going to end up on. because normally you would think when you turn your fabric, the stitch is going to come towards you, but the radiant stitches go backwards first. They will go backward with straight stitches to the length of that radiant stitch and then come forward doing the decorative part of that radiant stitch. So here we go. Going backwards, now it's doing the satin part of the arrow. It comes back to where it started, and you turn the fabric back so that you're in line with the line, okay? Press start. It stitches 3 stitches to complete the first one and 3 more stitches to start the second one. So if I want my next arrow on the other side of the line, I turn the fabric so that the part I want stitched on is away from me. So it stops and I turn it back so that the connecting stitch between those radiant stitches should follow this straight line. And because you're turning the fabric and because it's going backward, you can't use the circular attachment, because if the circular attachment were attached, you could not do this or this to the fabric. So
We could always, the circular attachment to stitch a straight line circle and then use that line as what we follow.
you could do that, yes, rather
Yeah,
than drawing one, yes.
right, which I wouldn't be very good at. Okay.
Come on, Mary.
Nah,
Anyhow, so that's, your aim is to always come back to where you started, so you end up with a nice clean line in between your radiant stitches. And you can leave them like that, but because I was doing so much messing around and because I like the looks of it, I came back on every one of mine and I used some kind of a decorative stitch to cover up, especially where I did more than one pass with the radiant stitches. I came back with a decorative stitch and covered up those straight stitches. It just looks a little bit better as far as I'm concerned. So again, there are, let me get this out of here. There are 13 different radiant stitches. And I made this little chart for myself of, and again, these numbers reflect the numbers in the 8.6 section, not the tutorial section. And there's quite a variety of them. And just like some of the floating stitches, you can alter some of them. So I took some of them, and this one was regular length. I changed, it was 34.1. I changed it to 28. I changed it to 22, and I changed it to 45. These are all the same radiant stitch. So you can change the length of them. I did not do anything with the width. You cannot change the density of these stitches, but as you make them shorter or longer, it actually ends up changing the density. You can see that the ones that were very short are much more dense than the ones that were long. And then I took the same stitch and I played with the width of it. The 7 is the default width, I made it skinnier, I made it fatter, and I made it real skinny. So you can alter these, and that comes in handy when you are doing, and I know I ran into it. On this seam here, where it's got the into the yellow, it was if I left it the full length, it was going to get too tall right here. So I shortened it. I made the stitch length shorter so it didn't get too tall for the space I wanted it to be in. So that can come in handy for that. You can, and as you could see from there, you can put your radiant stitches on a curved line. The thing that you have to think about is that you have to do the curving while you are in the straight stitch portion. So if I started out here and this was my first one, so I stitched that, then I come down to here. While I'm coming from here to here, I have to follow my curve with my straight stitches. All right, and I made a little curvy line here that I could show you what I'm talking about. Let's see, come here, sweetie. There we go. So there's my curved line, and I'm going to start sewing, and I'm going to follow my, I need to start over, that's why. Oh. Okay, so now I make my first radiant stitch. And when I'm following a non-straight line and I turn my fabric, I don't turn it necessarily 90 degrees. I try to put it so that the line is going across the foot. Does that make sense? My line is, if I look at the two red marks on the foot, my line is, I try to line it up with both of those marks so that it looks, the radiant stitch looks like it's sitting on the line itself rather than just sticking out. Okay, so now I'm going to follow my curve as I come around. And again, I'm going to line up my red marks with my line. Oops.
Did you find it easier to use the start stop button?
It's more secure, if I can put it that way. I'm just used to I'm used to using the foot pedal because it's, if you can train your foot not to move and let it stop when it's supposed to. But yeah, when you're starting out, definitely the start stop button is a better option. Okay. And it helps if you can remember which way you're supposed to turn the fabric. Okay. If you are doing, oh, I know. All right. On this one, when I was doing, let's see, can you see? When I was doing this radiant stitch here, I had done the floating stitch as the first decorative stitch on here. And as I was doing the radiant stitch, when I got to here, I did not want to put one right here on top of the floating stitch. So if you just hit your stitch restart button, when it finishes, or it finishes one of them and then it wants to put the next one, stitch those first straight stitches, then hit your, instead of turning your fabric, touch your restart button, and that will put you into the straight stitch mode again. And if that doesn't take you as far as you want to be, keep hitting your stitch restart button, and that will keep giving you those 3 straight stitches at the beginning of your radiant stitch to get you back past where you need, another stitch if you're crossing stitches. Does that make sense? Okay, Diane's shaking her head yes. And Mary's trying it.
You know what I noticed? Unless I'm doing something wrong, let me get out of here. I want to close that. How do I get out of that? When I select a radiant stitch,
Uh-huh.
and then I sew and I want to switch my radiant stitches, well, now it did it, darn it. Let me see. Well, I kept going back and getting the floating, but maybe I was getting that help screen.
That tutorial?
Yeah, and I didn't want that anymore.
And once you have a tutorial up, I don't think you can get rid of it until you turn the machine off.
Oh, okay, so that's why it kept sending me back to the floating.
You can't, Mary. I had to shut my machine off and start over. I just didn't want to ask that question.
Well, now you didn't have to ask, you found out anyhow.
I just closed it out in the upper right-hand corner. I didn't have to restart my machine.
I know, I couldn't, I tried to do that and mine wouldn't.
But it's, once you close it out, you still have this little symbol on your screen.
Oh, yeah.
And to get rid of that little symbol, so you don't hit it accidentally, that's where you have to turn your machine off.
Good to know.
Okay, now, some of these things on my masterpiece here are, the curved line is actually a seam, all right? And in order to do that, what I did was to take my 2 pieces of fabric, and let me see if I can get this someplace where you can see it. All right, can you see here? Okay. So there we go. All right. So what I did was I took my 2 pieces of fabric. I don't need that yet. And I laid them one on top of the other. And I decided what kind of a curve I wanted. All right. No, that's not good. Hold on, friend. They're gonna be that way, huh? Sorry.
You need an assistant.
Yeah, would you run over here?
I'd be happy to man your camera.
Okay. So anyhow, what I did was I overlapped my 2 pieces of fabric, figuring that this part of this one's going to show and this part of that one is going to show. And then I just took my rotary cutter and, making sure that I was cutting through both fabrics, I just cut my curve. All right. So then I got rid of that piece and I got rid of this piece. And then I took these two pieces and decided which one I wanted to be on top. And since the curve is exactly the same, it doesn't much matter. And then I took my glue stick and I overlapped them. Oh, maybe 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch. So that I did have overlap on my fabrics. Then I could come put I used a wide piece of stabilizer because I was going to be using radiant stitches, and they were going to go stick out on both sides of my curve here. And I just started stitching and using come over here, using the straight stitch portion to follow that curve. And after the radiant stitch comes back from sewing backwards and stops, it's not actually finished. There are straight stitches that finish that off. And you can use the stitch repeat function on your program, on your machine, so it only stitches one repeat of, oh, that was good, I should have turned. Well, this is what happens when you don't turn. And I had the single stitch program on, so it stitched 3 stitches after I turned back straight and stopped. You could set it for 2 or 3 or whatever you want. If you want to just do one and then change the stitch, the radiant stitch that you're using, every time you change the stitch, then you have to reset your single stitch program. Because when you change the stitch, it wipes out your single stitch program. Or, let me make sure I'm not lying to you. Okay, set for 1. Okay, it's still sitting at 1. But if I change my stitch, then my single stitch program goes away and I have to reselect it in order for it to function for the stitch that I have changed to. Does that make sense? That single stitch program only applies to the stitch that you currently have selected. If you change what you have selected, then the single stitch program goes away and you need to reset it in order to use it for your new stitch. Questions on that one? Okay. Everybody okay with radiant stitches? Did
Just
you,
to mention, what I just tried, you can bring your radiant stitches into, whoops, well, you can't see it, into Sequence Creator and put different ones together. You know what I'm saying?
I hadn't tried that.
Yeah. So if you wanted two different ones, you know, every other one or whatever you wanted, you can do it there. I just stitched it out. It worked.
Cool.
Yeah, that would
Thank
be
you.
really good.
I have to play with that one. I'm glad you're here, Mary, because you think of all the things that I can't.
Yeah, you notice how quiet I am most of the time because you think of it all. So there you go.
Oh, boy. So did everybody get a chance to stitch out a radiant stitch? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. That did our radiant stitches. Okay, done with those.
You know, my tension is not good. It doesn't look very nice. And I'm using the embellished thread,
What embellished thread?
the, 40 weight, the embroidery.
And is it the micro thread or the,
No, it's the regular embellished thread. But anyway, it's not,
well, the embellished thread is either matte. Is it the matte thread?
the matte thread. Yeah, that's what I'm using.
Okay, so that's 40 weight.
Yeah, but my
What
tension
do
is
you
like,
have in the bobbin?
I think I was using up some of my other matte thread. So I have matte thread in the bobbin too.
I would suggest you use embroidery bobbin thread.
Okay. Anyway, it's
See if
just
that doesn't
interesting.
help.
Okay, thanks.
If not, I'll play with some matte thread and see what we can find out.
Judy,
All right, I think, pardon?
I got really confused on the radiant stitch didn't go backwards.
It
So-
does go backward when you turn it. It's gonna stitch 3 straight stitches and stop. Then you turn it, it goes backwards, then comes forward and stops. Then it stitches 3 straight stitches. That's the complete sequence of a single radiant stitch.
But how do you keep it on the line? Because it did the straight stitches. Then do you turn it like you did with the other?
Well, when it's doing the straight stitches, that's when you can either go straight or follow a curved line.
Right. But then when I started again,
I know sometimes they don't line up.
well,
And
I think the stitch I picked, you just are supposed to go straight, not turn it.
Well,
Does that make sense?
are you in the radiant stitches, Diane,
Yeah.
on 8.6?
Yeah, number 4. But it's just doing it.
It stitches, then it stops, then you spin your fabric, then it goes again.
Right. So
Okay, now,
it does straight and then stops again, and then you just start again. You don't turn it again.
no, you turn your fabric. Turn your piece of fabric and start again.
let's do it, Diane.
Okay, then it started going the other way. I'll show you what it did.
Well, I'm having an issue, Judy, with stitch number 13 on that techniques.
Okay, are you on 8.6?
Yeah,
Okay,
It did that little straight thing, and then I turned it and it went this way and finished it.
I'm sorry. Do it. I'm sorry. Hold it up again, please,
Play with
Diane.
Diane, hold it up again.
So it did this little straight thing,
Yeah.
and I turned it and it went this way. I wanted it to stitch the straight thing at the end of this line of stitching, but it stitched more straight, and then
Oh,
I know, I'll try it again.
but Judy, when I did my number 13, it stitched it
Yeah.
all in a straight line. It didn't radiate out. Even on my screen, it's doing that.
Well, on your screen, it's going to be a straight line. It can't do any, it can't picture it otherwise.
Oh, let me try it then.
I'm going to stitch out 13, okay?
Oh. Oh, good. Okay, that's what was confusing me. I didn't stitch it out. I just looked at it on my screen, and it's just a straight line. But it stitched out right when I tried it.
Oh, yeah, the screen only shows you a straight line. It does not show it as it appears in the menu.
Yeah, and it does take up, I mean, I started a good 3/4 of an inch in, and it ran off the fabric, so it takes up a good amount of space.
That's why it's good to go in and go stitch by stitch and make yourself a little chart of how wide and how long they are.
Yeah,
So
I
you know
can
how
see.
much room you need for them.
Okay, problem solved on my end.
Okay, yeah, it's gonna show them to you on the screen, because as far as it's concerned, it's stitching in a straight line with stops in it. It's up to you to turn the fabric.
I guess I never paid attention to it. I just pushed the button, looked at the design, and sewed it. This time I thought about it, and it got me in trouble.
Well, that's dangerous.
On my account it is.
Diane, are you okay?
I think so. I think I just need to play and figure out what it's doing.
Okay. It's going to stop. Basically, it's going to stitch 3 stitches and stop. You turn the fabric, it sews backwards and forwards and stops. You turn the fabric back and it sews 3 straight stitches.
It's working better this time. I think it was operator confusion.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad we got the operator unconfused. Okay. Everybody okay with radiant stitches now? All right. So then the last category that we have is in category 8-7, if you are just loading stitches from the techniques category on your machine. These are what they are calling lace edge stitches. And on this pillow, we have some lace edge stitches. On both of these scarves, we have lace edge stitches. And these lace edge stitches can be done in sewing or in embroidery. All right. This is a sample of what I did in sewing. All right. I did 1 row. You are doing it on water soluble stabilizer, the Aqua Mesh wash away stabilizer. Okay. And you're using 2 layers of it. You're stitching with the stabilizer underneath your fabric. like this and extending to the right from your fabric, because the majority of the stitches are going to be on the stabilizer. Okay? And then you're going to wash it away and you're left with the stitches. Now, if you want to stack your stitches, it's very hard. And I did this in sewing and I got about this far before I got really off and quit. If you want to do something where you like those scarves or that pillow, then the best thing to do is to put them in embroidery and use the embroidery to stitch your lace edge out, because that's the only way that you can actually get them to stay where you want them perfectly. All right. So this is another sample that I haven't washed out, but these were done in embroidery, believe me, because to do them in sewing, about 4 stitches out, you're going to get off. It's a matter of the fact that you just can't guide the fabric that perfectly. When you are doing this, and when I do this, I am going to use a heavier thread. Most of the time I'm going to use silky 30 weight thread, and I will match that either with sewing thread in the bobbin or embroidery thread in the bobbin. And what I have here is some embroidery thread and my 30 weight silky thread. So let's try that in regular sewing mode to start with. And it depends on the look you want, whether you want to match your colors or whatever. The lace edge that was done on the pillow was done with a variegated thread, and it turned out really nice. And the silky thread does come in variegated, but you can play with different threads. It's just that I know that one works, and I like to use things I know work. I also like to pull my thread tails up when I sew. So
embroidery thread just isn't heavy enough?
I don't think it is, Diane, because this, once you wash out your stabilizer, this becomes a standalone thing.
Right.
And embroidery thread is going to get wimpy. And I just lost my bobbin cover. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to pick, and there's 6 different stitches here that you can do it. They call for the 2A foot. And all right, let me show you what I do. Can you see on your 2A foot, you've got red marks. All right, can you see those? See that long one in the center? I try to keep the edge of my fabric right under that middle mark when I'm stitching these stitches, so that the needle is going to swing to the left past that mark, and that's what's going to catch in your fabric. That's what's going to hold your stitch to your fabric. The rest of the stitch is going to be waving in the breeze. Okay?
Judy?
Yes?
The instructions call for the bi-level.
if you were doing, I know that, well, wait a minute, I don't have this one selected. Okay, again, it's a plus mark on the machine when you select one of these stitches.
Yeah, yeah, I know that. I'm just saying the handout we got
Yeah.
today says,
Okay, well, I'm
so,
gonna use the 2A foot, okay? Because of the groove underneath and I'm using heavy thread,
makes sense, makes sense.
because I'm afraid that if I use the bi-level with that no groove under it, that it's gonna mess up my spacing of my stitches. So, you know, certainly you're welcome to experiment with it and see if for you that would work better. But for right now, I'm gonna do it with the 2A foot. But
Okay.
thank you, Mary, for pointing that out.
Can you say, Judy, tell us where you position that on your foot again real quick?
The long red line in the center of the plastic part,
Yes?
I put that right at the edge of my fabric here,
Okay. All right.
okay?
Thank you.
And the needle is going to swing to the left of that, but I want that to happen. So sew with your needle down and use your presser foot, your gas pedal, all right? So I don't know if you can see that. Let's see if I can get Junior to turn here. Can you see where the fabric is in relation to that line on the foot? Oops, come on. Can you see that now, Peg? Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna sew for a while. And it tells me that I don't have the IDT down, but I can't with a 2A foot, so we'll ignore it. So it's gonna make 3 passes for each loop in this design. On each one of these stitches, it's gonna make 3 passes because it has to put a reasonable amount of thread into each one of those loops in order to give it body. And you'll notice that it's not just doing straight stitches when you stitch it out, it's doing like little zigzags so that the thread is crossing over itself on each one of those loops. Okay, that's enough. So this is what it looks like. It's sewn into the fabric. I don't know if you can see. See how let's see, upsy daisy. The stitches overlap the fabric, and then the rest of it is just the loop part of the stitch is in the stabilizer. So then when that's washed away, you have those loops hanging free like lace. Now, if I wanted to come to do it to try to get it to match up, I would start at the middle of one of these, and it's just not worth the aggravation to try to do it in the sewing mode. To build one in the embroidery mode is so much easier. So if you would go ahead and stitch some out in the sewing mode just to see how they stitch out and how it works on just one row of them, go ahead and then I will show you how to build them in embroidery mode and we can go from there.
Judy, can I try it even though I don't have heavier thread?
Oh, sure.
Because I don't own any of that. Oh, darn. I'm sure Carol's like, she'll come get some.
Yeah, you can come get some.
So that would have been sweet on that pillowcase I made.
Yeah.
I should send you a picture of it. It turned out so cute. It's all wrapped in a gift bag now, so I can't get it out, but well, I could, but then I'd have to repack, you know, I'd have to.
Oh, well, we don't need to do that.
But it turned out so cute.
Well, good. I'm glad because I liked your the idea that you were doing different fabric for the different hearts, and that's what Liz did too.
What was interesting was that I didn't want to do the second 5 in the hoop. I thought it would be quicker just to do them regular piecing.
Yeah.
But the size was different because the stitch, so it took me a bit to get all that figured out, but I did. I had to use my little seam ripper a little bit, but it was fine.
Okay. Yeah. You still, you know, if you did them manually, then you still had to trim them down.
Yeah. Well, I had to sew the seam allowance bigger, or
Well,
trim them
no, you just,
and then sew them. Yeah.
whatever. However it worked out for you, that's good.
It turned out great.
All right. That's good.
So Judy, we need to put our embroidery foot on.
No, I want you to just sew it with a regular 2A foot to start with.
Okay,
And your zigzag plate.
okay, I got that.
No.
That's my standby because I can screw up real quick if I don't have that plate in there. I guess I always think that you should need to have your, when you're doing embroidery, you always have to have your embroidery foot on there, but that's not always the case.
You only gonna, in sewing mode, the only time you're gonna use your embroidery foot is if you're doing free motion.
Now, Judy, were you using 12 weight thread? Is that what it was?
30,
30.
30
I
weight.
remember when
12
you-
is too heavy. 12
We
doesn't
did
like
that-
to go through the needlet.
Okay, because
easily.
we did that one class where that's what I bought all this 12 weight to do this. So I was wondering, so you used 30, okay.
Yes,
I'm gonna try
please.
the 12.
Well, if you use 12 weight, you're gonna need a 100 or 110 top stitch needle.
Okay.
Well,
Remember those placemats we made when we did this? But this is part of why I bought this machine. Okay, I'll go back to 30.
You bought it just cause you wanted it.
Yeah, but with all these stitches right here. So I do those classes and then you'd say, well, the icon does this. Okay, I'll go find 30 weight.
I just use 12 weight. I'm sorry, Judy, but I use 12 weight. I use the bi-level foot, and I use just the 90 embroidery needle, and it came out fine.
Okay, say that
Okay.
again. You kind
I
of
will
cover
do
up
that.
your mic when you held it up.
Oh, I use 12 weight, the bi-level foot, and the 90 embroidery needle, and I had no problem.
Okay,
I didn't even have a problem threading it.
well, okay. I just, 12 weight is just a lot heavier than 30.
Oh, yeah, it is, but, so Lee, try it with your 12 weight before you give up.
Thank you, I will. I'm ready to do it. So I remember
thank
doing it on my Epic. It was my Epic one though back then. with another stitch because we didn't have these stitches in the Epic.
And you still don't and won't.
No, but that's why now I do.
Okay.
It's so cute.
Okay, so we have to set up a small hoop.
Ah,
What's the matter?
My machine just shut itself off.
I'm sorry?
My machine just like blinked and turned itself off and back on. Does that happen very often?
On occasion.
Having a moment.
Yeah, they do that on occasion.
me too, Diane. I just broke a needle and I don't know why.
Is that what that was for?
Yes.
Okay. Has everybody been able to stitch out some lace stitches?
Yes.
Okay. Is that your 12 weight?
Yeah, I'm using the 12 weight, just like Mary said, it's working fine.
Okay. And Diane was using regular thread?
Yeah, just embroidery.
Okay. You know, as I look at these, I'm thinking that, I don't know, on these scarves, whether that's regular embroidery thread, it may be. So, you know, experiment with it and find out what suits your project and what suits you and go with it.
Yeah, I think the 12 weight would be too heavy for a scarf unless it was a heavier scarf, but a lightweight scarf would be pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the 30 weight is pretty heavy. If you're doing, you know, something on lightweight fabric. But if you were doing like home deck stuff or something, I think that that would be quite good.
Yeah.
Right, that's when we did this. It was placemats we were making, those denim placemats. Do you remember that?
Oh,
That's-
yeah.
that's when-
12 weight
That's
would
when we did it.
Okay.
for denim.
One of the things that they have in the project instructions, when they talk about the binding, is that they, I'm gonna have to move this so you can see. They put, when they made their binding, they sewed one of these lace edge stitches on the edge of the binding, and then they sewed the binding to the back of the project first, then flipped it to the front and top stitched it down so that you have a, that's not, there it is. So that you have that little lace edge as a decoration on the inside edge of your binding on a quilt or a project or whatever. And that's really cute.
That is great. Yeah, I like that.
Isn't that cute?
Yes.
But I'm not going to do it on my table runner. In fact, I don't think I'm even going to put binding on it. I just don't want to take away from any of that stuff in the center. So I probably am just going to pillowcase it. All right. Are you ready to see how to build them in embroidery mode?
Yeah, because I wouldn't even know how you could stack them on a long one to finish the edges. I don't know how you would do that in sewing, let alone have the I don't have the patience to do that in sewing.
Okay. Well, I think on these, let me look at these scarves. I don't think we really worried about finishing the edges a lot on these scarves. Oh, fall down. Because there's one edge and another edge. So I don't really know. It's been too long. I don't remember.
How you got that fourth row to connect? Yeah.
Yeah, well, getting the rows to connect is not a problem. Because like when I did this, you know, there's one thread here, which you could go in and just do a little zigzag stitch over that to cover it and to close it. And that's probably what I would do. If you were doing a long project where you had, and this doesn't match, but if you had you know, like these, and then you wanted to connect these, you know, you would carefully do some positioning, because then they should connect perfectly. If you have to do like an endless thing. So far, the only ones I've done fit in a hoop. And that's, I haven't done any where I had to connect them. Okay. All right. So if you want to build them in embroidery, you're going to go into embroidery edit. Okay. Embroidery edit. And then we're going to pick sequence creator. All right. And when you start sequence creator in embroidery mode, it's going to come up with 2 tie stitches, and it would normally, any stitch you pick would put in between those 2 tie stitches. Well, my way of doing this is that I'm going to go in and I am going to bring up my stitch settings, so I have my tools, and I'm going to delete both of those tie stitches, so I have 0 stitches in my sequence at this point. Then I'm going to go to my stitches. I'm going to go to category 8, 8, 7, and I'm going to pick my lace stitch. And I picked number 2. Okay. Then I'm going to close that and say, just to make this simple, I'm going to duplicate that until I have 5 stitches. All right. So now this is my base one. If you wanted 27 stitches, that's fine. If you want to know how long these 5 stitches are, if you touch this little arrow up here that says information, sometimes it will tell you how long those 5 stitches are, and it's 38 millimeters. If you're trying to, if you were trying to fit it into a hoop or make it fit on a particular project, and you had measured it and you knew it was 122 millimeters long, then you could put in enough stitches to make it 122. All right. So once I've done that, I'm going to say okay, and it's going to take me back to embroidery edit. Excuse me. All right. Now in embroidery edit, I have my 5 stitches, and I'm going to bring up my edit here and enlarge these so we can see them a little better. All right. So I want my lace edge to have 4 rows. I'm going to just use my duplicate button in my edit window, and I'm going to duplicate that one. And there's a couple ways to do this. And this may seem like the long way around, but I'll explain that in a minute. Once it duplicates it, it offsets it. But what I want to do is to move it so that the valleys of my second set match up with the peaks of my first one. So that means that those little legs that are sticking out to the left, they look like they are down below the peak of my first row, but I really want that. I want enough of those stitches to overlap to make sure that they're going to connect when I stitch those out, because those few overlapping stitches are the only thing that's going to hold those rows together. All right. So then I can just reselect my second one, duplicate it, and move it back so it's in line with my first row. So it starts at the same place where my first row started, and that it overlaps my second row. And then I'm going to duplicate that again and put my fourth row on, duplicating and overlapping like I did the first. Now, that looks like what we want, right? However, think about this. When it starts stitching, it's going to start up here at the top, and it's going to stitch down to here. When it gets down to here, it's going to go up to here and start over. So I'm going to have this long jump stitch. If I select my second one and I come down here in my edit window and I flip that end to end, then when it comes down here, what used to be up here as the start of the second row is now down here, and my only jump stitch is between here and here. So I come down, I go back up, I come down, and I need to flip that one end to end like I did the second one, so that I'm zigzagging back and forth with my stitching rather than having long jump stitches in between the rows. Does that make sense? Is there anybody that doesn't make sense to, or you don't understand? Lee, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I like that. So we're flipping every other row?
Yeah.
Is that right? Every other row.
Yeah, you're gonna, like, the odd number rows will stitch top to bottom. The even number rows stitch from bottom to top.
Okay, that's really neat. Thanks.
It's really handy, because otherwise you end up with these nasty long jump stitches, and they can get caught in, the next pass. So then when you can save this and then stitch it out. And that's how I did these guys, was to, build something like that. I just had, more stitches in there, and it stitches out perfectly. Actually, that's the right side. And this one up here is just a little illustration of what happens if you don't flip the rows. There's a jump stitch. I don't know if you can see it. That goes from here to here, from the end of the first row to the beginning of the second row. And I intentionally did not flip that, hopefully that you could see that jump stitch on there that you're going to get unless you flip those rows.
Oh.
And if you've got something long like the end of that scarf, you're going to get a really long jump stitch. Okay. Questions? Mary? Peggy?
Nope.
No,
Guy?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Lee's good?
I'm just
Okay.
playing with it and making sure that it crossed enough. That's what's a little bit hard to know.
Okay, let's look at this. Okay, because I can magnify it bigger. Okay, let me pull this one apart because that's easy. Okay, let me get the camera on there. Okay. Can you see? I don't know if you can see the little leg here that
Yes.
sticks down.
Uh-huh.
I want that full leg plus those first couple stitches to overlap the previous row,
Good, thank you. That helps.
okay? I mean, if you just had it so that just that little leg overlapped, I don't think that's enough. I mean, it looks
Okay.
really cool on the screen, but I think you're gonna need to have it, overlap more so you're more secure.
Thank you. That's
So
very
that's how
helpful.
it did, these. So that they did overlap that much.
Now, is that 30 weight thread that you used there?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay, yeah, that looks pretty good.
And it's this one on this pink, that's 30 weight thread too.
Okay.
So Judy, how do you know where to position your fabric then?
When you're embroidering,
Yes.
okay, let me see if I can show you. Let me go to embroidery stitch out and get about 10 tons of stuff off my machine. They happen to have a little.
Judy, again, what do you use that rubber stuff for? Why is that there?
This stuff,
Yeah.
that's because I just have a water soluble stabilizer. Just because I have just that hooped.
And because she wore her hoops out, Diane.
More grip for my stabilizer and make sure that it's not going to move. This is just, cheap shelf liner.
Right.
What size of hoop are you using?
Huh?
You have a little bitty hoop.
That's an 80 by 80.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. When it comes up, it's going to show each row separately. So I'm going to use color block merge on my screen. I'm going to engage that so it doesn't stop in between my rows. All right. And I don't have the right hoop, so naturally. Hold on. 80 by 80. Okay, there we go. Stop.
Mine actually showed up when I hit stitch out, it showed up in 3 rows.
I'm sorry, Peg, I couldn't hear you.
When I hit stitch out, it shows all 3 rows.
Depends on whether you have your butterfly selected or not.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm gonna go into precise positioning. All right. And I'm right now, as you can see, it's kind of in the middle of my fabric. And I'm going to move it so that my needle is the first stitch of this sequence is not this leg. The first stitch is actually right here where those zigzag stitches meet the leg. All right. So where this needle is where those zigzag stitches are. All right. And I do not want I want those zigzag stitches to be just barely into my fabric. So I'm going to move it so my needle, and I'm not sure that you can really see that. Come on, little guy. I'm going to move it so my needle is about a 1/16 of an inch into the edge of my fabric. And then to make sure that I'm going to hit my fabric all the way down the line, I'm going to use my corner moving options, the little square things here, down here at the corner. I'm going to touch that one, and I'm going to watch where that, with my needle just barely down, I'm going to watch where that needle rides on my fabric to make sure that it's still on the fabric and that it's pretty much an even distance from the edge of my fabric, which this one isn't quite. So I can adjust my fabric a bit, not perfectly when I'm doing it like this, but so when I like to go back and forth a couple times and just watch where that needle goes in relation to the edge of the fabric. And see where it is. Now, okay, right now it's sitting on, it's actually sitting on that first stitch. I'm going to move it over a bit. And once I'm happy with the fact that it's going straight up and down the edge of my fabric where I want it, then I'll go back into embroidery and give me a scissors. Turn it loose.
Judy, can you move your camera so we can see it stitch?
What, Diane?
I'm sorry, can you move your camera so we can see it stitched?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
There
Thank
you
you.
go. Perfect. Awesome.
Now this is the little jump stitch. Oops. All right. I did not turn off the trim stitch, which I should have. So it trimmed that first jump stitch. Ideally, I would have liked that jump stitch to stay there. So if you're doing this, besides doing a color block merge, also turn off your jump stitch trim. And it will do what it just did there. It'll just make that little short jump stitch, which you can come back and do a little zigzag stitch over to make it, to cover it up. And there you are.
It definitely adds perfection to the project.
Absolutely. I mean, there is no way I could even imagine doing that in sewing.
It's amazing.
Okay. Yes? Any questions, comments?
So then to keep moving that, you'd have to unhoop it, move it all up, or
Yeah, if you wanted to connect, yes. Now, I found out, anybody have any other questions about it right now? Or
Judy,
about anything that we did today? Peggy?
I have maybe a comment. If you were to line up the first one and you had to keep moving your stuff, how about if you drew a line on your stabilizer?
That'd work. But if you're moving your hoop, then you have to make sure that you get your hoop exactly the same too.
Wouldn't it be better to do it on a magnetic hoop?
You could. The problem is that depends on how big, how long a thing you want to do and how often you want to rehoop.
Well, like if you were going to do the edge of a pillowcase.
Yeah, you could just keep going around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I stitched it out, but I got to thinking if you wanted to do it longer, if you had some kind of a guideline, once you got it set there, then you could precisely, position
Yeah,
it.
I mean, yes, you can draw a line on your stabilizer. I still think you're going to have to use precise positioning.
Yeah, and I did that and it came out. I worked with it enough. It's right on.
Okay, well, good. It's a shame you can't show it to us.
what if you'd used a big hoop and then just repeated that design, connected them all together for the length of your big hoop?
Oh,
True. You
like
can
your,
do that.
Like group all that together and then duplicate it?
yeah, I think that would work too.
Well, either that or you could, when you build your design. Oh, stop. I didn't want you to do that. When you build your design, then you can just make it long enough for the whole big hoop,
Well,
select big hoop and then make it big enough to fit that big hoop. Because there's, let's see, let me find some.
so the biggest hoop is a 360 by 350, but isn't that the split hoop, Judy?
That's the one that you turn. All you care about is the length. So a 360 by 200 would be more than enough.
Well, your pillowcase cuff is as long as your pillowcase is. I mean, it's as wide as your pillowcase.
Right. It's going to be 42, 44 inches.
Right.
But this is a design that fits a 360 hoop. And I always pick the 360 by 200 because I certainly don't need the width.
Right. So, but that's not long enough.
It's not. It's basically about 13 inches.
So then you would have to move it one time and try to match it.
Twice.
Yeah.
To get 42 inches, you'd have to do it 3 times.
Right. Maybe I'll start with something smaller.
Do it for a travel pillow. But even that would take two, so. Only do one row and do it in sewing.
Oh, there's an idea right there, yes. Because I tried it in sewing and you're right, it's too frustrating. I don't want to waste my energy.
I don't know anybody that can get it to come out right.
But to do just one row would be fine.
Yeah, because,
You're not
It's-
matching up to anything.
yeah, you don't have to match up.
Right.
Okay.
Or you could do the cuff of a shirt, you know,
Yeah, you
just.
could do a collar,
Mm-hmm.
edge of a collar or a cuff or pockets. You could do some tucks and do the edges of tucks on a garment. Tote bags, all sorts of,
Fun things.
okay?
My brain is full again, Judy, just so you know.
Well, put your fingers in your ears. Or screw the cap on really tight. Anything else? Everybody okay? Marlene, I haven't heard from you. Can you talk to me? Are you just watching?
Maybe she fell asleep
Oh.
or walked away, but okay, it was good
Okay.
for me.
I
Thank
saw
you.
Edna the other day, Mary.
Pardon me?
I saw Edna,
Oh, you did?
and she said that you're going to give her your icon when you get your new one.
Yeah, not so much.
I told her good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Gives me the trade-in allowance.
So, thank you much for being here, and I hope you've learned some things and have stuff to experiment with. We do have for technique class next month, we have, if I could find it in the camera, this project, and I just made like little wall hangings or placemats out of it. But we're going to be creating our own applique, and this is all done in the machine, no software. We're using all the functions of the machine. We're going to create our own appliques. We're going to use applique creator. We're going to play with the fonts. We're going to play with some stitches. It's a fun project. It takes a while to get it built, but once it's built, it takes a little while to stitch out, but it's kind of fun.
Looks great.
I learned a lot by doing it. It is
Ah.
actually the project itself is a signature project for the new Ruby 90. So I had to figure out how to make the pfaff do what the Vikings do to have the project for both machines.
That would be great. I'll have to do both classes then. You'll do one pfaff and one Viking? Is that what you'll do?
You and Diane.
Mary?
Mary.
A lot of us have both.
The write-up will cover both of them, and
Okay.
hopefully I can get the write-up fixed so that people don't end up terribly confused.
Well,
But
sometimes you've done one day and one the other day, and that's worked too, so.
sometimes that makes it much easier on me.
Yeah, I think on us too.
But sometimes people don't have the opportunity to be flexible enough to accommodate that schedule.
Right, that's true too.
So if I can manage to do it for both machines on the same day and not confuse myself as well as you in doing it, that's probably the best.
Yeah, and I'll just plan on doing one machine one day and one machine the other day. So I'll put that on my schedule. Thank you.
Okay, great. That would be fine.
Yeah, okay.
Lee, are you going to get a new icon?
I'm sorry, huh?
I was asking if Lee is going to get the new icon.
No, I just got this one in November
I know, I just got mine in December. I think I'm probably good too.
because I have the Epic 2. You do too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, they go so well together.
They
You
really
know.
do.
So
Well, you
probably not.
And then in August, when Karen comes out and shows us all the fancy things we can do,
I know.
you can take you to the store.
I tend to wait till the price drops, except for the Epic 2. I didn't do that with that, but.
Well, I have to run. Thanks, Judy. Nice to see everybody. Bye.
Everybody too. Bye, Mary. We can't wait till you get your new machine, Mary. We just hope that Judy's still going to teach us on our old machines.
Well, yeah, it will be. I don't think, some of that stuff won't be all that different.
Right, so we'll see.
You saw
Okay,
Paul's
thanks, you
announcement
guys.
that, software class is at 1:30 tomorrow.
Yes,
Okay.
because we have the other one before that, the whatever it's called, license to create.
Oh, okay. That's
Okay,
why it got moved.
that's why, because that's been every day, every Wednesday at 11. She thought it would be done by now, but we can only get one project done each time. Can't do two.
Okay, well, that's good to know. It's good
Okay. Then the
flexibility.
next week, though, she switched it back to where license to create is later and the ruler class is earlier. So whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Okay.
Have a good
Thanks.
afternoon, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Diane.
See you later, Judy.
Bye, Peg. Let's see. There we go. I'll wake up.